let's get started. Hello and welcome to the Digital Out of Home Plus Mobile, a match made with Programmatic Fireside Chat. My name is Jem Jamal and I'm the Director of Global Business Development here at View. Today, I'm delighted to tell you that I'm being joined by Hannah, who is the VP of Scooter, on whether digital out of home and mobile can be a great match for programmatic success. Hannah, welcome. Should we jump in?
Yes, absolutely.
Fantastic. Let's go. Okay, so let's begin with Scooter. Scooter was originally, from what I remember, a full rich media DSP. Was there a reason in particular why the company strategy moved into digital out of home as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a history sort of steeped in rich media. We've come from a creative first background. So everything that we do is focused around really pushing the boundaries from a creative perspective for advertising. Added to that, our sort of core targeting strategy has always been focused around contextual elements. So we're big believers in the right creative in the right environment is what you need to drive success. So when the market started making that shift to programmatic out of home back in, what was it, 2017, something like that, maybe before, we sort of saw that as an excellent opportunity for us to expand what we were already doing. It was a very natural progression for us. It was very organic. And it wasn't like a sort of forced shift. It came about in that very natural way and really just slotted into what we were already doing. So it enabled us to expand from just doing our display and the historic activity to being able to push creative into those out-of-home environments. Yeah.
Fantastic. So opportunity, timing, right place, right time, as you say, it makes total sense to kind of move into out-of-home. That's great. It's no secret that digital out-of-home is being talked about as a complementary medium for other forms of advertising. But what about mobile and digital out of home? How does this particular combination stand out amongst other forms of advertising?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, I think the sort of omnichannel accessibility has become a very sort of big buzzword in the industry, especially all the people that we talk to, from advertisers directly to planning teams within agencies. Everyone's making that shift to looking at omnichannel activation and strategies. And I think every single combination of medium has the right place, right time. But I think the real special sauce that you get with mobile and out of home is that you've got that difference in that mobile does that one-to-one reach, whereas the out of home you've obviously get one-to-many. So you've got sort of those different ideas there, but they've got a shared commonality that you don't get with the other mediums. And that's actually with mobile, you can still reach people when they're out and about, they're not necessarily at home. So it allows you to reach people across two different platforms at the same time in exactly the same place. And it's something that's much more organic and natural to them rather than it being sort of forced in front of their face. So you're walking around, you see an out of home ad, and then you see something similar on your mobile when you're sort of slightly further down the road. And it feels much less intrusive as a consumer. And I think that's where the strength really is for mobile and out of home as a combination when compared to the other sort of mediums when you push those together.
Absolutely. There is that kind of, like you say, complementary side to it, isn't there? And how, you know, it reaches users and engages. But okay, I'm, say, a new advertiser just beginning my journey into digital out of home and mobile. Are there any insights or recommendations you would have for me?
I think this is something that I get asked sort of quite frequently, really. And the main thing for me is to just keep it simple. If you're sort of new to this combination or this way of working, this way of strategizing, it can be quite overwhelming. There's a lot of things out there. There's all these bells and whistles and shiny things that can be dangled in front of you, which is great. The technology's come a long way. There's all these opportunities and things that can really push boundaries. But I think if you're just starting out, I think you really need to strip it back and look at what it is you're trying to achieve, what that end goal is, and then figure out what from those shiny things you actually need to make that happen. Because I can guarantee it won't be everything. And there's a real exactly, there's a real sort of issue in the industry where people go all in and think they must have everything, and actually that's not often the case. So my advice would be keep it really simple, really look at what you're trying to get to, what the end goal is. And also look at there's reams of information out there. There's loads of sources, plenty of partners, DSPs, SSPs, media owners put information out there as well. And things such as this webinar, there's all this information at your fingertips. So really take a look at what's being said and sort of listen to what people are coming up with, because they're the people that have been doing it since sort of the beginning and sort of can see the progression and where things are. And yeah, just sort of strip it back, keep it simple.
Interesting. I mean, it kind of leads nicely to my next question, actually, and it's more around sort of planning a campaign efficiently across mobile and digital out of home. And you said keeping it simple. So if that was the case, how do you what should you really consider in the simplest form when it comes to actually planning a campaign across mobile and digital out of home?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think what we generally see, we see sort of two outcomes or two directions that these activities tend to take. I mean, there are a lot more, but these are probably the two most common ones that we see. And that's when an advertiser is looking for a really fast response. So that will be driving traffic to site, maybe footfall into store, or some kind of immediate interaction with an out-of-home creative, so scanning a QR code, for example. So those sort of fast interactions are one thing that we see. And the other thing that we see is actually the longer, sort of more brand focused activity, where it's all about a long game, building up that brand loyalty, that brand recognition and recall across a period of time, but that be sort of a few weeks, a couple of months. And I think really that's when you're looking at running out of home and mobile together, I think that's really the first thing that you need to consider. Are you looking at the fast response, or are you looking at the sort of long-term end game? And with that, you'll naturally find the sort of mobile strategy that fits in with your digital out of home from that. So obviously with mobile, you can retarget users sequentially, so you can follow up with them. We're able to see devices that have been around certain panels at certain times and may have been exposed to that ad. And we can follow up with mobile advertising using a look back window, whether that be sort of a few days or a week. So that's really for that long-term brand activity. And if you're looking for the fast response, it's all about layering that mobile activity at a geo level. So you're delivering activity to those mobile devices that are currently at that panel at that time. And that can be really, really beneficial, especially when things like driving footfall into store, or if you're trying to get that immediate interaction with the ad. So, I mean, in a simple form, it could just be, oh, there's a store around the corner, and you can have the same message on mobile and on the out-of-home panels. But as we start to develop and we start to get a lot more creative with the executions, it could be things like there could be a big AR opportunity on an out-of-home panel, and the mobile ad can actually direct the users to that and direct consumers to engage with that. So I mean, there's sort of two basic forms of what it can look like, and I think that's the initial consideration. What one are you going after, and then you can sort of figure out how they fit in together from there.
It's all very exciting. It's brilliant. And just a quick note for our viewers, if you've got any questions that you'd like to ask as well, please feel free to add them in the comments box and we'll get to them at the end. I'm going to move on to my next question, Hannah, if that's okay with you. So we know that programmatic out of home offers sort of high impact broadcast screens with maximum flexibility and trigger-based creatives. You know, you mentioned earlier it's a good one-to-many medium that's more flexible due to, you know, the programmatic activation. Subsequently, we also know that mobile ads provide substantial one-to-one audience reach, granular data sets, and ability for users to take direct action within the ad itself. What other additional benefits have you seen whilst buying digital out of home and mobile programmatically?
Yeah, so I mean, you sort of covered quite a bit there. On one hand, you've got that big bold brand piece that you get with out of home. You know, you've got very limited time to catch the attention of someone with an out-of-home ad. I mean, within a rotation, your ad might be playing for 10 seconds. You really only got sort of 2 to 3 seconds to really grab someone's attention with that. So from a creative standpoint, you want to make sure that your out-of-home ad is big, bold, clear, concise, limited on the copy, and it can sometimes be a bit mysterious as well. It can be used as that sort of primer to add intrigue to the consumer, like, what is this brand about? What are they showing? What are they trying to get across to me? And then when you combine that with the mobile element, naturally the mobile creatives can be a lot more intricate. They can have a lot more information in them, and of course they can be more interactive and ultimately engaging. So that's where you can really sort of follow up on that messaging with the heavier details of what really is going on here, and that can be applied to many different categories and verticals within advertising as well. If you think about things such as TV programs or film releases, you can have a short, sort of dark, perhaps intense trailer in the out-of-home ad, or something that's really, really intriguing and not necessarily quite clear, has that element of mystery. And then you can follow that up with a mobile element that can contain a full trailer within it. So you can sort of add on those two bits and pieces. And I think that's really where, you mentioned a lot about the flexibility and the ease of activation and the data sets. And I think that creative is that next sort of big opportunity, is how they work together. And everything about out of home and mobile should be considered as complementary. They're sort of cousins, not twins, as it were.
Excellent. Cousins, not twins. I like that. And let's open up this creative point a bit more then. So when it comes to supplying creative, do you recommend that advertisers switch up their campaign creative depending on whether it's a digital out-of-home screen or a mobile screen? Or are there similar results when you're using the same creative on both screens?
Yeah, I mean, I think there obviously has to be that overarching recognition across the two. It needs to sort of have the same look and feel, so consumers can put the two together. I think sometimes in some instances it makes sense to have a very similar ad across the two, and that's when it's really quick activation. You're quickly swapping from one screen to the other screen, and you just want to get it turned on, and that's great. And there is a time and place for that as well. But I think ultimately, if you're looking at it from a step before and you're really planning out what it is you're looking to achieve, then the creative should be a consideration for that. And you should at least consider what differences could be applied to each creative and how that could be pushed. And it's not always going to be dramatically different. Sometimes it's very small changes that have a big impact. And in some cases, they can be completely opposite ends of the spectrum. As I say, you can have a very simple out-of-home creative and a really full-on, highly interactive mobile creative. So there is a time and place for both, but I definitely think that if you have the luxury of time when you're looking at your activity, plan in different creative concepts for mobile and for out-of-home.
That's good advice there. So of the advertisers that you've worked with, has there been a standout campaign that used digital out of home and mobile uniquely? And if so, what are the most innovative strategies that you've seen when it comes to using both those channels?
Yeah, so I mean, I think a lot of what we see follows the sort of same sort of two formats I mentioned earlier. It's whether you're looking for sort of that initial fast response or building up that brand loyalty over time. I think the one that sort of comes to mind as one that approached the two channels in a slightly different way is one that we actually ran a couple of years ago. So I'm digging this one out of the archives. But it was a great example of how one medium can influence the other and actually strengthen the campaign overall. And it was for the Sun newspaper. So a while back, they were running some social media activity. And they were looking for, I can't remember exactly what it was now, it was subscribers for a charity event or something. And the social media ads were doing great, and then they sort of plateaued. And we stepped in to help them out with that and looked at, right, what have been the best performing creatives that you've seen across social. And I think it was within 48 hours, we were live with out of home with a creative that replicated that messaging. And I think we had it highly targeted to specific areas that they were trying to reach people in. And we also had sort of commuter times applied on rail screens as well. So we're really hitting a key demographic for them. And actually within sort of a week, they had oversold on their subscriptions, which had been plateaued for some time. So it was a really interesting case of how actually going the other way around. Quite often when using the two together, we start with out of home first, then we look at how we can tie that mobile back to it. But this is a really nice example of how mobile came first and then the out of home came into play and boosted performance just when they needed it.
That is definitely very interesting, because yeah, you're right. I mean, typically, when I think about it, I always think, out of home first and mobile to follow. But it's interesting that you can use it the other way around, and you can get brilliant results doing it that way, like you've seen in the Sun subscription campaign. So let's bring it closer to home for Vue. We've put some skin in the game here as well, and in the last several months, Vue ran a mobile and digital out of home brand campaign. Can you talk through what the strategy was that was used specifically on this campaign? And also, like, during the campaign, we had some mid-campaign changes that were necessary. How easy is it using Programmatic to make those changes? And how often do you and your team either make changes for campaign improvement or make recommendations to the client onto how to maximize performance?
Yeah, so this campaign, going back in my mind, again, digging this one out of my mental archives, we were delivering across New York, so it was a very specific area that we were delivering in, and we had a number of out-of-home panels that were in high footfall areas for the target audience. And the mobile strategy to go alongside that was to target within 3 blocks of those panels. So it was a super hyper geo-targeted campaign, looking at a very small area in New York City. And I mean, the great news was that from a mobile perspective, the CTR exceeded sort of norms by, I think it sort of tripled. It was the end result, the sort of CTR that we'd expect to see. So it was a great success. And I think in terms of sort of the changes that were made, we sort of made some pacing optimizations throughout to better spread the delivery of the activity throughout the day across both out of home and mobile. So we could really sort of hone into who was seeing the ad at what time and what was giving us the best uplift in performance, which was great. And yeah, the opportunity to make those optimizations and changes with Programmatic is so easy. You can just jump into, I mean, we obviously use our own DSP, but you can just jump into the platform and it's just press a couple of buttons and off it goes, changes made. So yeah, I mean, the benefit of that over sort of traditional out of home, where you're perhaps blocked into a couple of weeks purchase, it is very considerable, makes it so much easier to manage. And in terms of what we do for sort of other clients and when changes are made, it varies, depends on the campaign length. Things that are running for a long time, we perhaps go in and sort of jiggle up a little bit more, just to keep it fresh, especially if you're running on the same set of panels, you might be reaching the same sorts of people all the time. You might want to shift that up a little bit and reach a slightly different audience, or you might want to start applying more granular audiences as well. So we can also do that. So we can change all the panels that are being delivered on in live, and it's sort of a real-time impact. So yeah, I mean, we do it quite frequently. It just does depend on the campaign itself.
Fantastic. And does this campaign have a case study that we could share?
I believe it does, yeah. We can sort of follow up with that, and we can ping that out to everyone that's viewing if they're interested.
Fantastic. And yeah, talking about the viewers, probably a good point again to remind everyone that if you do have any questions for Hannah, please add them in the comments and we'll get to them at the end. So going back to the Vue brand campaign, Hannah, which kind of, as you say, did very well. Our budget was kind of what we'd consider probably small to medium. Would you recommend for the next wave of the campaign that we had an even larger budget? And if we did, what mobile additions, if any, would you suggest that we make?
Yeah, I mean, I think from the performance that we saw initially, there wouldn't be a huge amount to change. I think obviously the performance proved strong. I think if we were to run additional activity with additional budget, we could look at enhancing the mobile side of it. So an enhanced creative, perhaps we had a fairly straightforward creative initially, so we could perhaps look at building that out a bit more, using our sort of full rich format suite to put something a little bit more interesting out into the mobile ad slots. But yeah, I mean, I don't think there would be a huge amount to change there. Why if it ain't broke, why fix it? It performed well, so
Absolutely, a golden rule of advertising, right?
exactly.
Excellent. So next question is going to be more around measurement, which obviously we know is very important for out of home. So many digital out of home advertisers add measurement onto their campaign to prove awareness and brand uplift. With the addition of mobile to these campaigns, what sort of measurement would you recommend? Is there a two-pronged approach with higher funnel through digital out of home and lower funnel through mobile? I mean, what would your suggestions and recommendations be?
Yeah, again, I'm probably going to come across some always sitting on the fence here, but I think there's, as with sort of most things we've gone over, there's a time and place for both, and there's now we're sort of seeing the mobile introduction. There's more ways of measuring the success of a campaign. So I don't think there's one rule of thumb that's going to be for everything. It would depend on what your campaign looks like, what your KPIs are, when you were planning it, what did the end goal look like, what was success, and it is really making sure that what you're using to measure aligns to that and will give you that information. For example, we started to see a lot more activity where we're running footfall attribution. So we're looking at driving people to store, and that's what they're using as their measurement of success. And we do that using the mobile data. So for those guys, that is an excellent measurement tool. In other cases, they're looking at driving traffic to sites. So we look at perhaps the more mobile focused CTR. We can also look at, if there's QR codes or unique URLs included within the out-of-home advertising, we can look at tracking those as well. So that's another portion that could be right for some campaigns, but again, not right for everything. So I think there's obviously, time and a place for all these different measurement types that are available, but it's just making sure that the one that you're choosing to really look at is the one that really aligns with what you're setting out to achieve. I mean, you could measure everything on everything if you wanted to, but it's probably not going to give you any valuable information, and probably not going to be the most efficient way of wrapping up campaigns.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense, right? It's almost like, what is the outcome? As you're saying, what's the outcome that you're looking for, and then kind of work it back from there and use the relevant measurement that's going to resonate depending on the campaign objectives. Totally makes sense. Hannah, it's another one for you. It's kind of relatively easy to access digital out of home and mobile inventory in one market. I mean, the View example that we gave was in New York, so, US market. But how about from an international perspective? We have an international audience listening today. Could you explain the ease of multi-market activation when it comes to both channels?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think obviously with mobile and sort of all display, really, it's sort of taken for granted how easy it is to just run global activity. You just sit there and go, I want to run in this country, this country, this country, off it goes. And I think with out of home obviously being much newer, and there's different nuances within the out of home world as well. It has historically been slightly more challenging. I think now we're at a point where that's a thing of the past. We're connected to many media owners, SSPs globally. And we've gone about creating it in a way and setting everything up in a way that it is just as easy as if you were doing it for display. So although we've very much approached the programmatic out of home platform and bidder that we have as being specifically for out of home, the user interface and the way that it's actually accessed is very much aligned to what it looks like for display. So we've kept it nice and easy, nice and straightforward. And actually now, we're in a position where it's very easy for us to activate across multiple markets. we've done a lot of work with a specific travel client, and I don't think we've ever actually run more than one campaign in a single market. We've worked everywhere with them, and every single one of their campaigns is a combination of mobile and out of home. So I think the other sort of interesting thing that we've seen from that is actually the mobile strategies. The performance of those does vary in the different markets as well. So we can take sort of key learnings from that. And then look at how we approach running in different markets too. But in terms of the activation, it should, the fact that you're running in different markets shouldn't be too much of a blocker, and it's a quick turn on.
Fantastic, great to hear. Okay, last one from me before we open it up to viewer questions. Do any other campaigns that you've worked on really stand out for you? And if so, could you walk us through what these advertisers, what the media plans were for these advertisers, the objective and what they achieved at the end of that activation?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's sort of loads really. Everything that we do has a completely unique idea behind it. And I think one thing that we're sort of seeing more and more often now is the introduction of DCO creative. So I think that for me is another really strong case of running mobile and out of home together. And it can be, the particular campaign that springs to mind was pushing for a sale. So the advertiser was doing a countdown. It was sale now on, sale ends in 2 days, sale ends tomorrow. And it was running that sort of same creative message in slightly different forms across both mobile and out of home in a highly targeted area, which was a great, very simple use case for how you can include DCO into your activity and run it cross-channel. So that, I think that's probably one that springs to mind. What we're seeing a lot more of now as well is actually the introduction of sort of live data and how that can sit across both mobile and out of home screens too. This is one that hasn't actually run yet, so I can't say too much. But looking at including sort of live sports scores across both your out of home advertising. And then following that up with mobile as well, if you're reaching the right audience, they're going to be very intrigued to see what that live score currently is when they see that ad. And from some of the early activity that we've run, we've seen significant increases in CTRs across display advertising when live scores are included. So yeah, that's a very interesting one that hasn't yet run, but I'm sure there'll be a case study once it has.
Excellent. Look forward to it. Hannah, thank you so much. Amazing insights, lots of valuable input there that will be no doubt very, very useful to our viewers today. Should we check if we have any questions from the audience? Let's have a quick look up. Yep, I can see some here. Okay, so question here says, you said to keep it really simple when campaign planning, but what would you say are the must-haves or must-dos for digital out of home and mobile?
Oh, I think probably the first one to look at for out of home is sort of budget and scale. So what you don't want to do with your out of home budget is try and stretch it too thin, because you're going to lose sort of all impact there. So it's really considering how much you've got to play with, and what that split's then going to look like with mobile as well. How much do you want to separate out that budget? Are you going to have two very big healthy budgets for both? And then really looking at what's achievable from an out of home perspective. I would typically start there and say, what does that need to look like? How granular should I be with my targeting there? Do I need to hyper target? Is it very, very panel specific? Can we look at a broader area, but just a particular audience that we can include? So yeah, I mean, I'd start with that. I'd look at the sort of scale opportunity that you have with your budget, and then look at how much of that you want to assign to the mobile side of things if you're looking at running across both. Naturally, you're more than likely to have a higher portion of budget assigned to your out of home, just because it's the more expensive medium and you want to make sure you're creating an impact there. But yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the first thing I'd look at. Of course, audience would be the next point. So once you sort of worked out roughly how much you've got to play with and how far that can be spread, it's then how much you narrow that down on the audience front. If you're tying in a mobile strategy and you're looking at retargeting people that have been around those specific ads, those specific panels, then you're probably not going to want to layer on too much other audience data, because you're sort of narrowing it down to those specific people already. I mean, of course you can, there is stuff you can apply, but you're not going to go sort of all guns blazing on that front. You want to keep that relatively light to maximize the scale that you're getting there. But yeah, I mean, I think ultimately they're the sort of two key things. Obviously, every campaign is going to be unique, and it's just working out what you want that to look like at the end, and just really consider why you're making every decision you are. Every sort of hurdle you come across, every step that you take, you need to sort of consider why you're doing that and what the choice was and where that came from.
Excellent. I mean, that was a great question. So thank you to whoever sent that one in. I have another one for you here, Hannah. How granular can you get with the audience when advertising across both digital out of home and mobile? Do any campaigns stand out as hyper targeted in terms of audience?
Yeah, so this is something that we've been doing a lot more of recently. So some of you may already be familiar that we work with AdSquare for our audience data, and we sort of did a bit of a release on that earlier in the year. So the benefit of working with those guys across both out of home and mobile is that we can reach the exact same audience segments across both. So there's the continuity there, that you're actually targeting the same people. You're not using different data sets that are going to have variation in what that looks like. For out of home, obviously everything is based on sort of that index. So it's how many people around that panel really indexing highly against that audience segment. So it's a little bit more fluid, and as you know, it's one to many, so it's not going to be 100% of people around that panel at that time are going to be your exact audience. There is going to be fluctuation there, but I think that gives a really good sort of core groundwork of actually there are a lot more people in this area, which is great. We can then add on the mobile stuff again in the same area, but we can be a bit more specific with the audience there being a one-to-one. And then you can really use that to play around with how you're delivering the out of home. So if you're then seeing actually a really good performance and response from your mobile side of things, you know you're reaching the right audience, you know that's working really well, then you can keep the out of home sort of as it is. Alternatively, you may see that actually your mobile isn't performing as well as you need it to. So you start to shift that around a little bit. You start to play around, and you may end up shifting what the digital out of home targeting looks like off the back of that. You may start moving some of those panels just to really sort of optimize and make sure that you're reaching that right audience at that right time. So yeah, I mean, it's getting more granular. There's definitely good options out there, and of course, yeah, out of home is always going to be a one-to-many, so there's always going to be that variation, but it's certainly a good starting point.
Excellent. Yes, another good question. And there's one more, so if there's any other questions anyone's thinking about right now, it's a good opportunity to send those in. But the third question, the final question that I have here for the moment, is more sort of related to the Scooter platform, and basically asking around the number of markets, which markets that you're active in.
Yes, so we're global. So there's a very few sort of limited number of places that we can't access, typically just down to their sort of out of home not being up to sort of the programmatic standard that we're seeing elsewhere. But generally speaking, we're global. We're certainly active in all sort of the major markets across Europe, APAC and America. So yeah, no limitations there.
Excellent. So truly international, multi-market. And as you said earlier, you know, the ease to activate across these markets is a fantastic opportunity for advertisers. I think that's it. We haven't got any more new questions. Any closing comments that you'd like to make, Hannah?
Oh, I don't know. No, I think I'm all good. It was a pleasure to be part of this conversation. I think conversations like this are amazing for the industry, and to sort of keep pushing things forward and keep challenging everything. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing where mobile and out of home goes in the next 2-3 years. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of changes, as there already has been. So yeah, long may it continue.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely exciting times. Things are changing, but there's definitely lots of opportunities opening up. I'd like to say thank you again for joining us. It's been very insightful. Lots of interesting detail that's come out, and thank you for our viewers for joining us. See you later. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.